Well, welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Long Game podcast with myself, Ben Scallan, and my co-host. This is Fatima Gunning, my esteemed colleague, not to be confused with Jason Osborne. He has not become trans. I feel like announcing his transition on the show would have been a weird way to go about it. You know, it probably wouldn't have been the way I would have chosen to reveal a fact like that. But
It would have been rude not to tell his wife first as well.
exactly, yeah, that's got to be a rough way to find that out listening to this podcast. But yeah, so Jason is currently just away on holidays. So, obviously he had some family difficulties there for a while with his newborn daughter. And so he's taking some much needed time off. Thank you to everybody who sent in supportive messages and things. It's going a lot better than it was initially. So thanks be to God for that. But Fatima, I wanted to ask you, as our resident court reporter, crime correspondent, if you want to put it that way, what did you think of the Taoiseach's response to my question about Randy Gladstone? For those who might not remember, we mentioned this on a previous episode about how a Guyanese man had 19 previous convictions in the UK. He was barred from entering the UK for those offences. These included rape, kidnapping, theft, things of that nature. And then he proceeded to enter Ireland, where he committed another rape and another instance of false imprisonment within days of arriving in the country. He attacked an 18-year-old girl, and he's been sentenced to 10 years in prison. And so this morning I asked Taoiseach Simon Harris about that. What did you think of the Taoiseach's response, given that crime is now your domain and your area of expertise?
I think the initial reaction was that his response is simply not good enough. He basically said something on the lines of, well, we have systems in place and most people who come in are nice. Well, that doesn't unrape the 18-year-old girl, does it? No, it doesn't, Simon Harris. It doesn't do anything to mitigate the fact that real people in this country are suffering real life consequences, some of which are absolutely hideous because the state is failing in some instances to carry out basic checks on people. You know, I've lived abroad. I was working in South Korea. I had to get Garda vetting before I left the country, before they would let me in, before they would issue me with a visa. They wanted to be sure that I was not a criminal and a scumbag, because they don't want criminal scumbags in their country. And it seems like the Irish government doesn't share that view.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it's the UK, which is our neighbouring jurisdiction, just seems astonishing to me. And the fact that Harris, and look, I'm willing to believe him. He said, for those who haven't seen the clip, he said, I'm actually not familiar with the case. I don't know anything about it, so I don't want to respond to the specifics. And I have no reason to disbelieve him. You know, you want to take people at their word and assume they're operating in good faith. So let's assume that's true. I find it shocking that he wasn't aware of this, because this generated huge discussion on social media. We even had, as we discussed last week, Sinn Féin representatives saying this is an outrage and we need to get to the bottom of how this was possible. So when you have Sinn Féin coming out saying, why was this guy in the country? That's when you know we're kind of reaching critical mass of, the bullshitometer is going off the scale and something needs to be addressed here. And as you say, his response was effectively, well, I don't know about it. I haven't heard about it. And there are systems in place. You know, we take people's fingerprints and da-da-da-da-da. But if that was the case, why did this guy get in? Can you explain that to me? And obviously he can't explain it to me because he's not even aware it's happening. So you can't give me the specific methodology as to how an individual like that ends up in Dublin molesting people.
Yeah, and like his point of like, well, most people coming in are nice, that has absolutely nothing got to do with the substance of the issue.
Yeah, I'm sorry to cut you off. But because that is true. Like, it is absolutely the case that the vast majority of people who come into the country are not going to run around raping people. I'm sure that's fine. I'm sure that's absolutely the case. But as you rightly say, what difference does that make to the individual who was attacked by a rapist who came into the country? Like the numbers are not the issue. It's the fact that somebody was heinously abused in this specific instance, which we're talking about.
Yeah, but what is he saying with that? Is he saying that like, oh, well, most of them are nice, so, you know, that's why we're not doing the great checks as well as we should be, because we feel that most people coming in are good faith actors, and therefore, like, if a few bad ones slip through, then lads, it's not really our fault. Because I just don't really understand like what the point of saying most people who come over are nice is in the situation when he made that remark. I mean, like, if I invite 100 strangers over to my house and 5 of them absolutely wreck the joint, it doesn't really matter to me if the other 95 are nice or not. My house is still wrecked. And that's essentially what's happening here.
Yeah, that is the problem, isn't it? The quality control, and the fact that, like, now the term unvetted. And by the way, I'm not suggesting this guy's an asylum seeker. I've not seen any indication online from the news reports that exist that he was in the asylum process. He could just be. I've actually, that's one of the things I was hoping Harris would clarify, is what exactly was he doing here? What's going on? Was he here on holidays? If so, why are we giving holiday visas to people with these kinds of convictions? Like, the guy was literally barred from entering the UK after he did what he did here. He tried to hop on a ferry and flee to the UK, and they said, "Sorry, sir, you're not allowed into the country. We have you like on a list that says don't let this guy in under any circumstances." So, why that was not communicated to the Irish government and the Irish authorities is beyond me. And we've talked about this case a couple of weeks in a row on the podcast, and it is one case, and there are many, many. We're talking about a country of millions of people where there's all sorts of interactions happening every day and crimes being committed left and right. But I think it's so perfectly emblematic and such a microcosm of the broader problem, in the sense that, like, if you use the term unvetted males, or saying the government isn't looking into people's backgrounds sufficiently, you get attacked, you get demonized. We have the Gardaí themselves coming out to say that isn't true, it's misinformation, we check people thoroughly. And then you turn on, you don't have to go to Gript to hear about this story. You don't have to go to some kind of horrible, disreputable organization that isn't in the good graces of official Ireland. RTE reported this. The journal.ie reported this. It's out there for everybody to see. And you're not supposed to believe your lying eyes.
And again, like, these are the same politicians that will tell you that women's safety is their priority. And then when you look at their actions politically and the consequences of those actions, like, it really does not seem that that's true at all. It's very hard to say that the current government, who have been overseeing this laxity in our border security, care about women and girls at all.
On that note, you have been in the courts reporting in a very exhaustive way on some of the cases that are currently unfolding in our country. Has anything jumped out at you or caught your attention recently? I've been meaning to ask you a whole load of questions since you've been on that kind of path, because it's an area that I am not nearly as familiar with as you, and it's kind of fun to have somebody who's experienced in the way the judicial system works from the inside. What's been going on lately that's caught your eye?
There was a pretty horrible case today before the Circuit Criminal Court, something that took place in, I believe, 2021, around the COVID lockdowns, where a pregnant lady and her husband or partner were having dinner at Boof. Your wife, and me have been there on several occasions. It's a restaurant that we like. But sorry, I have Borat in my head now being like, my wife, but I can't get in. Oh God. Okay. So this lady was there with her partner, and then these 4 lads who were off their heads on cannabis, like, they just came up to her and or just blew cannabis smoke into her face, which led the some of the staff to go and intervene and be like, look, wait, stop harassing our customers. And then one of them, his name was Daniel Purdy. He was before the courts today. He took a bottle from the bar that's across the road. I think, is it called the Stand or something? He basically took a wine bottle, then hit this guy who was working at the restaurant. Then the guy, I think the bottle fell to the ground. He picked it up again, smashed, and then basically stabbed him in the shoulder. It was just horrific, what was done to this man. Basically in the middle of, what is it? What street is that? It's on the kind of junction with Wicklow Street. really like one of the fanciest, a fancy area to go out in Dublin. And there's this a case of extreme violence right in front of everyone. There was another one where these two guys got out of a van, and one of them, this is over €50, by the way. So like the guy that was before the courts today owed €50 to, I think it was the brother of the guy that was injured. But this other man, not the guy before the courts today, got out of a van, then swung a wrench at this guy's head. Then the guy that was before the courts gets out of the van also and like slashes him in the head with a samurai sword. There's a lot of I mean, Gary had a pretty comprehensive article was it yesterday or the day before, basically outlining that despite what the government and the kind of media establishment tell you, that violent instances of violent crime in Dublin have gone up substantially, which is, you know, people just observing the evidence of their eyes, even if the government tells them not to. Like Helen McEntee famously said that Dublin was safe,
while flanked by about 1 million. Like, she was in a tank when she said it. Basically, she opens the top hatch and comes out and says, by the way, the city is safe. Like, don't
she was
worry.
In a mobile isolation unit when she said that, like with armed cars.
Yeah, Ireland, that was as they launched the Ireland's space program, and she was safely about a few thousand kilometers above the ozone layer, telling us, don't worry, everything's grand.
If I had like several Gardaí like following me all the time, maybe I do, I would feel very, very safe in Dublin too. So yeah, she probably felt safe.
So has it surprised you? Like, we all, like, everything you said there is shocking, and it shouldn't be shocking because we know it. Like, you know, you walk up the street, you see scumbaggery, you experience it, you hear stories, you read the news, you say, JD Mark, that's terrible. And so we all have kind of like a baseline awareness of it. Since you've been actually sitting in the court and hearing about these cases, has it surprised you, or is it pretty much what you expected? Was it a level above what you even thought?
I think it is worse than I thought. You know, just the level of people producing knives or like samurai swords, machetes. Like, I think you see the word machete in the Irish news now, almost as a matter of course, where I don't think it would have been the case 10 years ago. So yeah, like, and you know, even some of the stories that were in the news, I believe it was last week, of that the Instagrammer girl who was followed to her hotel room, like followed off the street, through the lobby, up in the lift, and to her very hotel room by a complete stranger who had his belt in his hand. That's terrifying.
So we just came off the back of a whole conversation societally about toxic masculinity and the fact that women are unsafe at the hands of men and so on and so forth. You're a woman. You find yourself in situations where there are potentially dangerous men at protests and incidents like that. What is your perspective on, do you think society is becoming less safe for women? Because of course, like, we talk about migrant crime and the Randy Gladstones of this world, and that's of course an issue that nobody can ignore. There are also a lot of Irish scumbags, as we know, who are engaging in heinous behavior. There were those, you know, there's many instances of this. I was about to start rattling off examples. We all have examples that come to mind of this kind of thing. Do you think that society is becoming less safe for women across the board in general? And do you think that's a masculinity problem?
Just to address, like, yeah, the four I mentioned, including Daniel Purdy, who attacked the guy from Booth, they were all Irish, smoking weed or whatever in the middle of the street. The guy with the samurai sword, Irish. So yeah, we have plenty of our own homegrown hooligans, which begs the question, like, do we need to be letting more in? I think that's a question a lot of people are asking these days. Do I think it's a masculinity problem? No, I don't. Like, you know, in general, no. I think some of the most lovely people I know in my life are men. I think, you know, men do so much for us. Like, if you like roads and you like you like having roads and you like having, you know, plumbing and all that kind of stuff that keeps you like from having to live in your own filth. Like, you know, most of the people who are involved in bringing that about are men. So I don't think it's a masculinity problem per se. I do think that there's a problem with, one of the aspects will be certain cultures that have different attitudes towards women, because not all cultures have the attitude towards women that we have here in Ireland and more broadly in the West. And I think, that's pretty undeniable. I am surprised and shocked that there are people who continually deny that, despite the fact that we know that certain people from, I think it's called the MENAPT region, the Middle East, North Africa, Pakistan and Turkey, are very substantially overrepresented in instances of sexual violence against women when they go to other regions. I think the Telegraph did a pretty substantial breakdown of UK government statistics that back that up. So, these statistics are coming from the UK government. It's not some kind of a right-wing conspiracy website. I mean, we saw what happened in the UK and what's alleged to be still happening in the UK with the mass rape of largely teenage, 10 and up girls by predominantly Pakistani rape gangs, grooming and rape gangs. So I think that there is a real toxicity among certain groups towards women, whether that be in their own countries where, in some cases women are not allowed to go out by themselves. When I was in Pakistan visiting my father, I wasn't allowed to go out by myself. And that was it wasn't because my family are very conservative Muslims, like they're actually quite moderate in comparison to many other people, but it's just a basic safety issue. No, you cannot leave this house by yourself because God knows what will happen to you. And that's a reality that a lot of women in other countries live with on a day-to-day basis. So I don't really know why Western liberals or whatever they are trying to deny that that's a reality when it's an observable reality. Moving away from culture, I think that I would find it very difficult to imagine that the proliferation of pornography, and especially violent pornography, doesn't have some kind of a effect on the male psyche and the male view of women. I remember a couple of years ago now, I did a piece about, I think it was Donegal, like a rape crisis centre in Donegal, where they were basically saying that these really young girls, like 13, 14, were coming in and their boyfriends or whatever were trying to do really violent and disgusting things to them, like things that you would imagine, the teenagers I would find it hard to imagine that they even know what that is. Maybe 10 years ago, I don't think they would have known what that was. And yet it seems to be that this porn culture is putting a really extreme kind of expectation of what sexuality is into the minds of men. Maybe young men are more susceptible than older men. I don't know. But yeah, I think that kind of a general lack of certain men valuing women as individuals and as, like the Bible says, like he who finds a wife finds a good thing and receives favor from the Lord. Like they're not really living out that attitude, I believe, in a lot of ways, which is really, really tragic for them as well as for the women they're mistreating.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the problems we see in society when it comes to women's safety is also just a general decline in empathy, full stop, where people are being more predatory to each other. And this is a point that will probably upset some people to say or cause an argument, and that's not my intent with it. But I think, and this is terrible, it's unfortunate that this is the case, but because we know women are physically less capable of defending themselves, they just are, it's a shame that a woman would ever have to defend herself. But, we live in an imperfect world where there are scumbags who victimize people. And so in that circumstance, the first people who are going to suffer are women, children, the elderly, because they're the people who are least capable of defending themselves. So it's not even a morality thing necessarily. Whereas if you see a guy who's walking down the street and he's 6'2" and he's built like a rugby player, and you're a scumbag who's looking to victimize somebody, you're probably going to let him go. Not because you're giving a free pass to your fellow man who you like, because you're both men. It's because he can break my jaw if I try to do something to him, and this petite woman can't. So when society becomes more violent and scummy, women are going to bear the brunt of that. Children are going to bear the brunt of that, and so on. Pensioners. But it's not necessarily that those groups are being targeted. It's more that we're all there was a proliferation of psychopathic violence that starts with the weakest people that we have to offer. So I don't know that it's like a women being targeted thing the way some people claim. It's obviously unacceptable and terrible, but I feel like that's more what's going on there, would be my theory on it anyway.
I mean, I think that there are elements who think that like women who dare to go outside by themselves, not covered from head to toe, or fair game. I think that is a cultural attitude. That is something I discussed with Nouria Khan, who is an ex-Muslim. I think she's ethnically Pakistani, born in the UK. That's an interview I did. We already discussed that topic a little bit, but I wanted to, you actually reminded me, what's the name of the guy that you were on the Tonight Show with, and he said that he didn't want to have to protect women, or he didn't want to have to spend his life providing for women or something. Who was that guy?
Yeah, that was Owen Cleary, the teacher.
Yeah, I just remember, my skin kind of crawling, being like, do you not get that, like, the burden of childbirth is still exclusively borne by women? And, would you not like to maybe protect and provide for someone who's just pushed a human being out through their like...
I'm gonna be, he and I were arguing on the show, I'm gonna become the devil's advocate, Owen Cleary defender in that instance. It will be actually interesting to hear your perspective, because as I'm sure you know, because you saw the clip, and we all know, like, in fairness to him, what he was saying, and it came out terribly. It was like an awful clip that went viral, and people were like, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't want to protect women. What he was saying, and the subtlety was lost, he should have phrased it a lot better, was we should live in a society that's so safe that women don't even need to be protected. Like, I don't even want a society where women feel like they have to be protected by a man, because then we've already failed. Or I want women to be so independent in their careers that they don't need me to provide for them, because she's doing grand herself. She's sorted. And that the fact that we're even thinking like, oh, I need to protect my woman, I need to provide for my woman, that we've already gone wrong and we're already unequal. That's kind of like the angle he was coming at it from. But then, like, he dropped the quote, the clangor of a quote, where he said, what was it? Like, I don't want to have to protect the women. I don't want to be called on to protect the women in my life. It sounds like a disaster, but in fairness, the point he was making was a little bit more nuanced than that, to his credit.
Okay, I accept that, but at the same time, Owen, that's not reality. So all your ifs and buts don't really make much sense in terms of how women actually have to live. So, I mean, a little dose of reality there into the utopianism. I think does he think we live in the Garden of Eden or something? I don't know what planet he thinks we're on. But
yeah, because I mean, I would have liked to, and unfortunately the show ended. Like, there were a few more points that I would have wanted to make, but one of the things I was going to say was that women do not only deal with violent threats. Like, there are threats to people's safety that are totally natural, that have no human agency whatsoever. Like, God forbid your house catches fire and somebody has to carry you out of a burning building. Men are probably going to be better equipped at dealing with a situation like that than women. Again, that's just a biological fact. Or again, hurricane response or whatever. Or the example I gave on the show about the Titanic, where there's a limited number of lifeboats and somebody has to give up their seat. Again, men typically do that at their own expense to protect women and children, or at least they have done historically. So the idea that if we eliminate all crime, which will never happen and is literally impossible, but if somehow we socially engineered society to create a perfect utopia where nobody ever even thinks of attacking another person, you would still need men to protect women in all sorts of situations. God forbid a woman's walking down the street and a pit bull attacks her. Who's going to protect her other than men? And obviously I'm not saying there's no women who would intervene. Of course there are. But who would you want to protect you in that situation? Probably a man.
Yeah, and I think it's a really kind of like moving away from Owen. I don't want to dump on him too much, but it's a really immature and anti-reality sentiment to try and kind of deny that men are physically stronger than women and therefore physically, naturally better equipped to deal with some certain jobs and situations that happen in life. It's just an anti-reality viewpoint. It's just not true.
Yeah, well, that's one that your one on the show, the host Katie Hannon asked me, like, are you saying that women are weaker than men, when I said that men should protect them? And I said no, because I didn't want to get into the subtlety and nuance of it. As far as what I meant by that is that women are not weaker in that they have many strengths that they are good at. I think when you say women, not when you specifically say, but when people say women are weaker than men, then they think of their mother who gave birth to 5 kids and was emotionally strong and did all these things. So there's all kinds of different strengths. But yeah, like on a raw physical level, there is no way you can deny that men obviously have a physical strength advantage, and it's just pure delusion. Like, I think that's a great litmus test when you're having a conversation about this, that if somebody won't even accept that much, you're dealing with somebody who's just fundamentally not serious and unmoored from reality.
Yeah, it's an anti-reality statement, and I think it's disingenuous to be like, so what you're saying is, it's like, come on, we know that when we're saying women are weaker than men, and in general terms we're talking about pure physical strengths. But I think it's a little bit disingenuous of people to kind of have a Kathy Newman moment and be like, so what you're saying is like men are better than women. It's like, no, like it's not what we're trying to say at all. And like, in the reality-based situation where like women are physically weaker than men, should we not then, if we care about women, should we not then structure society in such a way that recognizes that to both parties' advantage? I would reckon that we should.
Yeah, I think that's like the absolute baseline. Like when we can just start accepting basic reality that is observable with one's eyes, that's when the conversation can actually begin. Because on so many issues, like, and not to keep going back to it, but like what we discussed at the start about, is Dublin getting more dangerous? If you have eyes, it's getting more dangerous because you can see it getting more dangerous. If you have eyes, that men clearly have a physical strength advantage over women. It's like, I feel like the conventional view is that there's 2 different competing worldviews that are vying for control of the narrative. You've got like conservative people and you've got liberal people, and they're going at it. The modern incarnation of liberalism, a lot of the stuff that we're arguing with, isn't even real. Like, you don't have a meaningful philosophy, in the sense that what you're saying is just absurdist nonsense that is factually baseless and mental. Like, if you tried to, if God forbid, let's say there was a nuclear war and we were all thrown back to the Stone Age and we had to survive in a kind of a post-apocalyptic wasteland, if you tried to build your society around the belief systems that these people promote, you would instantly die. It wouldn't work for even one generation, because you would have the women out hunting while the men stay at home to protect things, and you wouldn't enforce your borders. You'd let any random tribe or interloper wander into your fields, and they would take your stuff and they would kill you. And like, they're the only people who would survive in such a scenario, obviously it's an extreme situation, it's like a thought experiment, would be people who had strong family structures, the traditional family unit, who enforce their borders rigorously and ruthlessly. That's the kinds of people who would be able to perpetuate themselves. They would have kids. They wouldn't sit around and say, oh, I don't think I'm going to have children, I'm just going to be, what do they call them? Dinks, double income, no kids.
Oh, yeah.
Which, like, obviously I'm not saying you can't make that decision if you want to, but I'm just saying if everybody lived that way, the species would go extinct. So when you put it all together, you realize that the only serious philosophy that can actually perpetuate the human race in good times and in bad is some kind of traditional conservative model.
Yeah, I was listening to Louise Perry, who wrote the Case Against the Sexual Revolution recently. And she was saying that she feels that, or maybe it wasn't that she feels, maybe it was based on research, I can't really remember. But she was basically saying that one of the reasons why people are delaying marriage and childbirth, it's not necessarily all economic, but she said that because, no, let's say like 40, 50 years ago or whatever, like let's say after the Second World War, which is not 40, 50 years ago, but men, like young men like late teens, early 20s into their mid 20s would have had the experience of conflict and war under their belt, which would have made them appear very competent and, able to deal with risk, able to, provide, protect. It would have given them that kind of almost like a curriculum vitae of, I'm a man. Whereas nowadays, guys don't really have that. So when guys are still kind of, early to mid 20s, it almost seems like they don't really have that kind of, those kind of credentials to attract a woman enough to for her to be like, yeah, he's got it together. I think he'd be a good father, even if it's kind of like almost like an unconscious thing that women do when like in the process of mate selection. And I thought that was pretty interesting, that maybe it's not all like, I don't have a house or I just don't want to have kids. It's more that there's something, amiss with the signaling between the sexes.
Yeah, I mean, you can actually shed some light on this because, of course, I don't know how, I'm not a woman, believe it or not, so I don't know how women think about these things from a first-hand perspective, but it's my understanding, and it appears intuitively right to me, that one of the most attractive traits a man can have from the perspective of a woman is competence. Yeah. And basically just the understanding that if I ask him to do something, he'll get it done, whatever it is. It could be protecting the house, or it could be something much more mundane, like there's a problem with the fridge. Can he fix it? Or can he fix the door handle that came off? Or whatever the hell, that kind of stuff. It kind of, the specific issue doesn't matter. It's just the fact that he's capable and competent and able to file his taxes and do normal drive, for example. Would I be right in saying, and the fact that that's so lacking in so many young people means that, like men still have this boyishness about them long into their 20s and even 30s in some cases, or beyond. Would you agree with that as a woman who is interested in men? That would be something you encounter a lot, or be a serious impediment?
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely competency, and it's also, I suppose it's like the ability to acquire resources. Like, it's not necessarily wealth, because like I think somebody can be like a nepo baby and have like, millions, that they're going to inherit or at their disposal, and be an absolute like dumbass that you wouldn't want to judge with a barge pole. It's more like, okay, this guy, does he have, is he sensible? Is he competent? Is he trustworthy? Does he know what to do in a bad situation? Like, and then do I believe that he has the ability going forward to use those skills so that we'll be okay? Even if he doesn't have, a 6-figure paycheck, does he have drive? Like, does he want to work? Is he a layabout? Does he want to like play PlayStation and smoke weed all day? Or does he actually have a drive to do something, to achieve something, to give something back? So yeah, though I think that a lot of the time, like, women get accused of being gold diggers because they would like a guy that is a provider. But I think that sometimes gets conflated with like women wanting Chanel handbags and holidays. And I don't think that that's what it's about for the average woman. I think it's more that they want to be able to trust that in times where they're like completely economically just out of the ring, when like giving birth, obviously, and when you have a small child, that this guy has everything together. Like, the lights are not going to get switched off. Like, there's going to be food in the fridge, that like, we will be okay. So it's about competency, definitely. And like, I think having a sense of humor, like being able to laugh at, the kind of the more difficult situations that arise, is really, really an attractive trait, because, your life is going to not be perfect all the time, and you want someone who can kind of have a bit of a chuckle with you to get through things.
Yeah, I think I feel like women, almost like an investor, the way like an investor will see a company that's a new startup that has nothing going for it currently, but they'll see the potential in it if they're shrewd, and they'll go, this could be the next Google or whatever. I better get in on the ground floor here. I feel like women are really good at doing that with men, where they can see more in a man than is readily apparent. And they go, no, this guy could really be something if he gets his act together. I better get in here now while he's, I don't say that in any kind of a critical way. I think it's actually like a good thing that like women are often great at unlocking a man's potential that he might not even see in himself, where he's just doing some kind of, he's operating at this level. And she's like, no, you could be up here, and I'm going to make sure he gets there. And it's great for both parties involved.
Yeah, it's a bit like the artist, seeing a block of marble and then like bringing David forward from that, like I think something Jordan Peterson says, who like I am a big fan of. He says that, when you love somebody, you see how they could be if they were their best self. Like, and in a way, like, to get a bit nerdy here, it almost reminds me of how in The Lord of the Rings, where like Frodo has been stabbed with the Morgul blade, and he's kind of passing from this world into being a wraith. And in the books, it's Glorfindel that helps him. But anyway, in the movie, Arwen comes, and when she gets off her horse, he sees her in her kind of, her elven form, as she would be seen in Valinor, where she's basically like this glowing angelic figure, whereas the kind of normal people in the normal Middle Earth just see her as, obviously stunning, beautiful elven princess, but kind of in a duller version and a more mundane version. But it kind of reminds me of like when you love somebody, you almost see them in that exalted form, and you as you said, like you can see the potential that's there. And I think, if you get the opportunity to be with that person, part of your job as their partner is to feed that and to notice when that shines through and to kind of encourage that.
Yeah, like I think about how when I met my wife, I technically, for a brief period, just for a couple of months, was unemployed. Now, I wasn't just sitting around doing nothing. I had an unpaid internship that was lined up abroad, and I was going to go do this whole thing. And so I was waiting they had confirmed it, and I was waiting for an email back. And so I was in kind of a transitory phase, and then COVID hit, and so it got cancelled, and it never happened. And then one thing led to another, and I ended up with Gript. But I think about that a lot. That goes through my mind, how this woman started dating me when I literally didn't have a job initially for a brief period. But she obviously, I'm not patting myself on the back or saying like I'm fantastic or something like that, because we were just a good match for each other. But it's just that she obviously saw, okay, he might not currently have a lot going for him, but he is not, like, I can tell he's going somewhere, and I want to go along for that ride, that kind of a way. So yeah, like, I think that's kind of a cool, and also like, I know we're going to whole side tangent about that, but I also feel very lucky that I met her when I did at that stage of life, because I feel like dating, it wasn't that long ago, you know what I mean? Like, I think it was like 22 when I met her. But yeah, and now I'm 27. But I feel like it would have been a lot harder a few years on, once you're doing what we do, you know what I mean? I think it will definitely become trickier.
Maybe you wouldn't have had time to kind of foster something. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
I think I was listening to a podcast. I believe it was like Tammy Peterson. I'm obsessed with the Peterson family. But she had this girl on, Freya India, I think is her name, and she's just saying that, like, a lot of it's like people who are in the dating market, they feel as though they have to have everything perfect. Like, they have to be perfect. Their mental health has to be perfect. They have to have the perfect job. They have to have the perfect house. The house has to be clean, and like everything just has to be perfect in order for them to then almost deserve to have someone in their life that loves them. And I think that that's not true, because your house will never be perfectly clean. Like, you'll never have gone through so much therapy that you're basically like the Buddha now, and you just like never get pissed off about anything. Like, that will never happen. And I even had a conversation with a friend of mine who was saying that like he felt as though if he were to, try and like recruit a girlfriend, that he needed to be able to essentially like have a house ready and have everything ready to essentially like, put her in and let her enjoy. And I just think that's too much pressure, especially nowadays. Like, it's not like, people who went to college 10 years before I did, I think that they were able to basically get a mortgage and a house because they had a BA in something random. Whereas like, that's just not the case for us now. It's just not even a thing. So, I do think it's like, it is too much pressure to think that you have to be some kind of perfect Adonis in order for someone to love you. And did I spell my name wrong? Does that have 3 N's?
Fatima Gunning.
Okay, I just noticed that now. All right. Which was a funny way to end that like beautiful anecdote about how no one's perfect.
So if a guy was watching this and he was interested in you, which we're 100% going to get, when I started this podcast with Jason, the amount of comments I got saying, why did you pick this bozo? Why did you not pick Fatima? It'd be so much easier on the eyes, blah, blah, blah. We're going to get the inevitable deluge of thirst comments and so on. If a guy was interested in sliding into your DMs, what are some, I was going to say what are some do's, but I think the don'ts are more interesting. Like what's the instant red flag that you would avoid at all costs? What would you be primarily interested in?
I think like I had somebody slide into my DMs. It doesn't happen that much, but like they were basically saying like, are you single, asking for a friend? And I just think that somebody not having the courage to put themselves out a little bit for you, like I think it's really attractive for women when a guy shows that he's willing to take a risk to tell you that he likes you or to ask you for dinner or something like that, because I know like nobody likes rejection. Like rejection is like one of the most horrible things that happens to people in life. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but like it's also a funny thing that men get really, really scared of asking a girl out or getting rejected, and it's something that like when you're a young guy and you feel that nervousness, you tell yourself, "Listen, it's no big deal. The worst she can say is no. It's not a." But in a way, it actually is a big deal. Your instincts are kind of correct in the sense that if you were living in a tribe in prehistoric times and you're living in your little village, there might be like 20 women in the entire tribe who are potentially eligible matches for you, who aren't already taken or who are out of your age range. And so, and as you know, women all talk to each other. Women have their little social circles and cliques and women's opinion of a man is heavily influenced by the opinion of other women. If other women think he's a clown, she's less likely to find him attractive. So from that perspective, the deathly fear that grips a man when he's about to ask a woman out is because on a primal, instinctual, animalistic level, he's thinking, if I blow this and she goes off to her friends and says, yeah, your man's a weirdo or your man's an idiot or whatever, I could have literally just condemned myself to lifelong celibacy. Like it's a disastrous, fatal calculation that you're making. So yeah, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to throw that out there. I thought it was funny that like in a way it's actually justified the terror that grips men that we're going through that.
Yeah, no, I do think it is. Like I don't mean to make light of it. Like, we've all kind of really liked somebody who didn't really like us back, and we all know how sad that is and how long it can take to kind of get over it. But like, I don't know, I have this policy where if somebody asks me out, I usually don't tell other people because, in tight-knit groups especially, I think it's it's maybe kinder to not tell everyone because, it's like, oh, if Paddy asks Fatima out, then Fatima says no. And then Paddy looks like, less impressive to all the other girls because she said no or something. So I just like keep it to myself, I don't know. It's just, I think that's kinder. And I would appreciate if somebody did the same thing for me. Not that I ask guys out because that's not my job as a woman. But yeah, that's kind of how, I view it. But I do think that, showing that he's willing to take a bit of a risk for you is really attractive because it plays into his ability to take risks for, going forward in your life together. And and that he recognizes your value, he's willing to take a risk. So maybe he's able to recognize the value of other things that are worth taking a risk for. So I think it's impressive, to be honest.
Yeah, so I guess that that directness, and I'd also like it's one of those things where obviously confidence, the confidence to not put like an enormous amount of importance on it, I think probably has an influence as well, because it indicates other things about him indirectly.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like there's someone for you, and like, you know, unfortunately, it might not be this person that you really like at the moment, but I think that one day, you know, even if you go through a horrible breakup or something like that, I think that a day will come when you realize why that had to happen and you're glad of it, because that opened the door to something that hopefully will be better and better for you and bring you more happiness than the thing that you were clinging on to before. And because I think that, you know, I think that life has a way of working itself out for your benefit. And obviously, like, I'm Catholic, we were both Catholic in this room. So I do believe that things work out for the best if you just have a bit of faith, and it's like, don't take things that seriously, you know? It's okay.
Yeah, because there's that whole like I think it actually came up during the RTE Upfront program where somebody gave the advice to men like just be yourself or whatever, and obviously that advice gets made fun of, and I think rightly so, because like, what if yourself sucks? That is a possibility. You know, there are people who are just not it, and that, I think, all it should tell you is not that you're a useless loser who will never amount to anything and you should jump off a bridge. It doesn't mean like you should give up. It doesn't mean any of that. But it does mean like being honest and realistic with yourself and saying, if I was a girl, would I date me? And if the answer is no, like, you got to just be brutally honest with yourself and tot up your pros and cons. And don't be needlessly harsh. Like, obviously, we all have things that are gone for us. It might be, you know, different for different people. But if you know you're not in great shape, or you know you're really disorganized and you can't hold down a job or whatever it is, recognize that and think, okay, if I am myself as like an unemployed fat guy with no prospects, then I'm probably not going to get very far. So then you've identified the problem, and now you know what to rectify. And then, you know, with a bit of effort and a bit of working on yourself, you can get to the level where it becomes a realistic possibility for you. But yeah, I've always found that funny, to like, be yourself. It's like, you do not want some guys to be themselves. Like, it really depends on who is yourself. Like,
I think when they say be yourself, like, are they saying kind of clumsily, like, be the best version of yourself? Because, you know, like, you can't self-optimize, you know, like, I mean, we could eat like slobs and, like, you know, not have jobs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, but we were obviously making an effort to contribute in some way, shape or form. And I think especially with women, like, not every guy, like, you don't have to look like Henry Cavill, although it would be fabulous if you could. Because girls are...
I'm lucky that I do, you know, that I don't have to...
Yeah, you were just born that way.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think girls and women are more... they're inclined to become attracted to someone over time when he's competent. Like, all the things that we discussed earlier. He's kind, he's competent, he has a sense of humor. So, like, you don't really have to be some kind of a sculpted Adonis to have a girlfriend. It's like, you know, just do your best. Be the best version of yourself that you can be. And, like, you know, people like Jordan Peterson, again, talk about that. You know, like, make your bed, or like, go to the gym, or like, have a sense of responsibility. And once you kind of put all those things in place and aim for that, the other things will fall into place, hopefully, more likely than not.
Well, I think I'm not gonna tell people to flood your DMs, because that would be, I'm sure, disastrous. I don't think that would actually.
I don't have time
work
to
out
read
too
them anyway. I'm too busy up on the CCJ hearing about
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
violence. And...
Maybe commit us if you end up in the courts for some kind of reason. That might be a way to network with Fatima if you're interested.
Commit a crime and come and see me in 2026.
Apologies for the rambling, meandering, all over the place, but I felt good about that. I felt like that was a very normal conversation. You know, I think Jason and I have a very structured way of doing it. We're bros for life, so we have a kind of an internal system going on. But I thought this was a fun departure from that, and hopefully people will find it edifying. I certainly did.
Yeah, like you're like potato waffles, and I'm like a plate of spaghetti.
Yeah, I think it was very, very all. We like, believe it or not, people at home, we actually had a plan for topics to discuss going into this, and then the script just went out the window because sometimes you're just having a good conversation and you don't want to stick to systematic approach like some kind of robot. But with that said, thank you all so much for watching. We will be back next week, hopefully with Jason in tow to fill us in on how his time off was and how his transition is going. And so with all that said, catch you all next week. God bless.
Bye, everyone.